Hello, 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 and this is Tagore Almeida from the Uncultured Company, and welcome to my podcast, A Pint of Imbecile Wisdom. Now, today on the podcast is I've had somebody that I've known probably for about 3 or 4 years since I've been in Singapore. I got introduced to him by our common friend Luke. I got introduced to him because he's connected with cinema somehow, but I think our relationship has parked cinema on the back burner for quite a while, and we've become very fond of each other. I'm extremely fond of this gentleman. I'm not just saying it. I love spending time with him. He's got a few bad habits, like every time we meet for a meal, he always chooses the same restaurant, and most often he also eats the same dish. But that's one of the things I love about this guy. He has he's the chairman of the Singapore Film Society, has got extensive years of experience in cinema and in the media itself in Singapore. But to me, he's just my dear friend, Kenneth. So welcome to the podcast, Ken.
Tagore, thank you so much. I don't know that I deserve all those kind words, but a lot of the things you said actually mirror perfectly how I feel about you in terms of, how we might have started our conversations based on certain domains of expertise, but I think our relationship, our friendship has far transcended that. And I'm not embarrassed to admit, yes, I'm a creature of habit. Yes, I live and breathe cinema and media, but cinema and media reflect life, don't they? And I think that's one of the joys of doing what we do. But I'm delighted to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for giving me the honor of an opportunity to talk to you, to rub minds with you, and with everyone who is watching and listening. Thank you so much, Tagore, my friend. You. I am deeply honored to call you my friend.
Thank you, Kenneth. Same here. So, Kenneth, we're going to talk about Singapore, the country that both of us live in. We're both very respectful and love it, and are very fond about all the quirky little things that we do here. So let's introduce the world to Singapore. But before we do that, Kenneth, let's talk a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and what you've been doing in your career, and then we'll come into Singapore.
Okay. Well, I've actually spent all of my adult life, in fact, part of my teenage life as well, in the world of cinema and media. I was 11 when I chose my own movie to go to at the cinema for the first time. And my passion expanded beyond watching the movies. Lots of people like watching movies. But I got interested for some inexplicable reason in also what I call the whole environment and ecosystem of movies. How do the projectors work? Who decides what movies get shown? How do they roster the staff? What is the screen made of? So I was hanging out at the cinema so much. And for films that I really liked, I would go and see them again and again. So soon, staff recognized me, invited me up to the projection room. I did a business degree in university, but my dissertation, I chose to do it on cinema advertising. So it permeated every part of my life. My first full-time job was in market research, but I chose as many media and marketing projects as I could. And then I worked for our national broadcaster, MediaCorp, at the time when Singapore was just opening up and having new competition in terrestrial, that's free-to-air broadcasting. The media landscape, of course, has changed a lot, but that was a great experience looking after television stations, radio stations, things like that. Then for 5 years, I worked for Golden Village, which is Singapore's largest cinema chain. It's also an independent movie distribution company, handling 50, 60 films a year as a rights holder. That was great fun. When the news first broke that I was going to join Golden Village, one of my friends in particular, who is in a different industry altogether, he said, Kenneth, let me get this right. Your new job, you're going to be paid to watch movies. Have I got that right? And I said, yes, but lest you think it's all fun and games, it is a retail business. It's about optimizing your merchandising mix, like in a department store. I had great fun. Then I worked for 9 years for the Info Communications Media Development Authority, which, just for the background of our listeners who may not be from Singapore, it is the Singapore regulator as well as promoter of the media industry. So administers the licensing, the regulatory, legislative framework, but also houses the National Film Commission and gives grants and assistance schemes to help Singaporean content creators and Singaporean enterprises to grow and to scale and to globalize. And underpinning all of this, I've been running the Singapore Film Society, which is our national film association, for a long time. Fast forwarding to the present day and age, our objective of promoting the medium of cinema has not changed. The ways in which we do that have evolved. So we have, for instance, Zoom dialogue sessions with filmmakers when it's not so practical for them to travel around the world. But the core, the crux of what we curate and present to consumers is still very much in the cinema, in the theaters, because that's the most immersive experience. So I live and breathe what I do. I'm very, very grateful for the blessing of being able to make my passion my work. There is no dividing line. They are one and the same. And, it was actually through, you mentioned, Tagore, that Luke introduced us. Luke and I were colleagues at the Infocom Media Development Authority, and we remain closely in touch. So it's beautiful how these connections get built and made, and that's me.
Okay. So we've talked about Singapore and Singapore. So I know how passionate you are about this great country. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about Singapore that you think they might not be aware of? Let's leave all the quirks for later in the conversation, but a little bit about Singapore itself that you think people are not usually aware of.
Well, Singapore is, depending on where in the world you are based, can be quite far away from where you are. If you live in North America, we are talking about at least 15, 16 hours flying time, and that's without a transit stop. We have one climatic season all year round, which is what most of the rest of the world would call summer. It's a great place in which to live and work because it's very advanced. We are what we call an island city-state, and you can drive. So Singapore is shaped like a diamond that is supposed to be shown with a standard lens, but which is projected on the cinema screen instead with a widescreen lens, flattening out the diamond and making it a little broader at the sides. And you can drive by freeway from the east to the west. That's the longest measurement, if you will, from one end of the island to the other, if there's no congestion of traffic, in about 1 hour and 15 minutes. I find that with my international friends, that gives them a better grasp of the size than just miles or kilometers. The language of administration and business is English. Not everyone around the world realizes this. And one other bit of trivia that may be fascinating for our podcast audience. Singapore's resident population, 5.5 million people. Pre-COVID, Singapore's annual cinema attendance, 22 million. That's an average of 4 times per person per year. Obviously, the pandemic has affected that a bit, but this is a country of avid movie consumption. Why? Economic development of Singapore, lifeblood is international trade. Therefore, totally open to international culture. Therefore, completely assimilating global movie culture. Moreover, land area is small, climate is hot and humid all year round. Land area is small, real estate is expensive, homes are small. Recreation is out of home, but indoors because it's hot and humid. People go to the cinema a lot. People also go to shopping malls a lot. But I think maybe the one thing I would say about Singapore that maybe not a lot of people know if they haven't been here or haven't heard too much about it, is that Singapore is truly a casserole, a melting pot of cultures, people, cuisines, languages, sensibilities, faiths, everything.
Absolutely.
And you can find a microcosm of just about every part of the world represented here.
And to add to that, I think it's if not the only country, one of the few countries in the world that actually celebrates every major religion's holiday. It's part of our culture. So people get time off for Christmas, for Easter, for Eid or Hari Raya, as they call it here, for Diwali, for Vaisak. So we celebrate. It's in the DNA here that we celebrate and acknowledge every major religious festival. Yeah,
that's absolutely
right. Why do you think that's important, Kenneth? And what can the world learn from it?
Well, I think it's important because Singapore is essentially an island of immigrants who came from many different parts of Asia for the most part, but from everybody came from everywhere else originally, and so by natural market forces, it's multiple ethnicities, multiple languages, multiple faiths, and by having this way of life where everyone's celebrations, everyone's traditions are visible, respected, embraced, and enjoyed. For example, the holidays that commemorate a major religious milestone, all of them are public holidays in Singapore, right? You began to mention it. It just means that Singapore is truly unique in that all races, religions, cultures, ethnicities live together harmoniously. And not just tolerantly, but harmoniously. And, it starts really when you begin to go to school. In America, I think you might call it elementary school, right? Kindergarten, elementary school. Here we call it kindergarten, primary school. But really, I'm talking about up to the age of 11 or 12. And really, in any classroom, the kids will be multi-ethnic. Not because it's purposely designed that way, it's because that's how the pattern falls. And, likewise with major residential estates and so forth, food as well. That's one of the reasons why we have such a plethora of cuisine available. It's not entirely by coincidence. It is planned. It is, I think the government makes sure, and with good reason, that there is space for all of this. So Singapore has 4 official languages.
I was going to come to that. Correct. Yeah.
Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil, representing the main ethnic groups here. And so it works. It's really a melting pot. And also, this is, I would say, the safest place in the world to live. I mean, you can walk on the street at night or early in the morning at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. alone. You can be a lady of any age or a man of any age alone, and I can guarantee you'll be fine. So it's a safe.
Yeah, I'm going to say something. Before I moved to Singapore 8 years ago, Kenneths, and I was doing a little bit of research into Singapore, what it's going to be like. And somebody who lived in Singapore and worked for the same organization as me said, he said, let me tell you about the crime to go. I said, what? He said, you'll find these little boards in the neighborhood saying a crime has been caused in this area. Please be alert. And he said, usually the crime is someone's bicycle has been stolen.
Yes.
So that's the height of some of the crimes that are commonly known in Singapore. But funnily enough, you talked about the 4 national languages or the 4 official languages that we have in here. But there is also a 5th language, Kenneth, which let's educate our audience. It's called Singlish. It's an unofficial language in Singapore, and it's Singapore's own flavor of the English language. And I think it's cutely funny and amazing. I like the way when in English you could say, yes, I'm able to do that, or you say, no, I'm afraid I can't do that. In Singaporeans have just broken it down to can and cannot. So, do you want to go out for a meal? Can. Do you want to go out to the cinema? Cannot. So, where do you think that came from? And tell us some of the other cute little words that are so unique to Singaporeans and the Singlish language.
Well, I think one reason or one originating factor for Singlish is the fact that this is multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual. And because every school child learns English and one other language. So every student is bilingual, not necessarily equally good in both languages, but studies it at least for 10 years and is able to write and read and converse reasonably functionally. But because the four languages are actually all very different from each other. Now, my other language is Chinese, is Mandarin. And the grammar, everything about Mandarin is diametrically different from English. So one of the reasons for Singlish is, for instance, Mandarin is a very cryptic language. So I'll give our podcast audience an example. Some of the audience may understand Mandarin, but for those who don't, I will explain this. There is an expression in Mandarin that consists of four Chinese words, four characters. And literally, the four characters are 1, knife, 2, parts or portions. And the expression 1 knife, 2 parts means to cut your ties completely with a place or someone. You might say, for instance, A and B had a bitter quarrel and they decided from there on it would be 1 knife, 2 parts, right? So they would break up. Now, because Mandarin is like that, in English, if I ask you, Tagore, can you come over to my place and spend the whole day with me reading through the draft of a script I'm preparing? And you know that I know you are extremely busy with many projects. In English, you might say, how would I ever find the time, Kenneth? I'm so snowed under, something like that, right? In Mandarin, the grammatically correct and elegant response in Mandarin, if translated literally and word for word into English, would be, tomorrow, where, got time. It's perfectly all right. 明天哪有时间 is tomorrow, where, got time. It's perfectly fine in Mandarin, but it comes out when it's transliterated that way. Now, I only know a smattering of Malay and a few scattered words of Tamil, so I'm not qualified to really say if it's the same thing with people who speak Malay and English and Tamil and English, but I can vouch for Chinese and English. So because you have this melting pot, sometimes in psychology, don't they call it retroactive interference?
Yeah.
You learn this, you learn that, but sometimes this one interferes with that, and then you confuse the two memories. I think it's a bit like that with language, but also because Singapore is a small island city-state, right? And with no natural resources, no minerals, no agriculture to speak of, everything is imported. I understand something like 80-90% of the food that people consume here is imported from outside Singapore. So there is this drive, this impetus, this almost obsession to deal internationally, to trade, to be on the move, to be brisk, to be fast-paced. Life in Singapore is fast-paced. And I think that's why also Singlish is quite cryptic, Don't beat around the bush, don't embellish it. So you're asking me if I can join you tomorrow? Cannot. I know you won't take offense. I'm just telling you plain and simple fact. I can't, or I can. So I believe these are the reasons. I'm not a linguistic expert, but just thinking about what goes on around us in Singapore, I believe these are some of the reasons for this charming and endearing variant of language, the 4.5 or the 5th language, if you will, Singapore called Singlish. Singapore English, yeah.
It is. And it's actually a great connect with Singaporean. When you can talk to them in Singlish, there's an immediate warmth that opens up to you. But before we get into the other cute quirks of the Singaporeans, you said, it's an island. It'll take you about an hour and a half max to drive from one end of the island to the other, if there's no traffic. But given that, Kenneth, one of the things that really blew me away, another thing that blew me away, was how much of greenery there is in this small little country, and so many parts of the world are reclaiming land and destroying oceans and mountains and whatever. But Singapore really has made it a point to have great, like the botanical gardens and these huge trees. When you go anywhere on the island, there are open parks. I mean, why was that so important? And rightly so, for having done it. Why do you think that was so important to the forming of this country?
Well, I think it was on purpose. It was by design. It was because the founding government and the continuing governments have recognized that otherwise, in no time at all, with the land scarcity, and you'd have to build upwards most of the time, right, high rise, this place would become a complete concrete jungle. So when you have a lot of land area, it doesn't matter if you keep building. It doesn't matter so much if you keep building, because there will be areas which, again, they're just not suitable. They're too far out. They're in the suburbs. They'll remain that way. But in a place like Singapore, everything is developable from an architectural point of view. So it was part of the plan and policy from the outset to have greenery, and we also have a lot of attention paid to cleanliness, right? As in having a clean. So hence this clean and green city. The green part, when this philosophy was conceived upon Singapore gaining independence in 1965, it was not so much about environmental consciousness. Well, it's related to it. Obviously, if you have a lot of greenery, that is good for the environment. But it was first and foremost just to have the greenery. Just to have the greenery. So, for instance, annual national tree planting days, where in schools and in residential communities, the members of parliament, the political office holders would set the example, and they would plant a new tree sapling, to do that. So it's by design. And if we go into any of the public housing estates, one of our bigger ones is Tampines, right? Quite near the airport. It's got about 300,000 people living in Tampines, I'm told. And so it's very dense. It's a very, very densely populated residential town. But it's also got an extraordinary amount of greenery. So it's planned and it's designed that way. It is not something that happened by fluke. It's deliberate. And also we are very blessed because being in the tropics, being so close to the equator, there's so much tropical and tropic-friendly flora and fauna that can flourish here easily. Unlike some parts of the world where, because of the climatic variation, at some times of the year, your greenery will literally it will disappear. But in Singapore, you get greenery all year round for these reasons.
Yeah, but having said that, the weather helped. But I think it's a great move that the government and the people of Singapore have respected that and have actually, taken advantage of this and grown it. And the fact is, 2 years ago, I was shooting a film called Alive somewhere in Singapore. And again, we were in the middle of a park, and some of the trees were so old. I mean, you take about 10 people just wrap, hold hands and just wrap around a trunk, the leaves. It was beautiful. But let's come to some of the more quirky things about Singapore now. And you can't be offended, Kenneth, because I know where you live and I'm going to come and say sorry. So, is food a national sport of Singaporeans?
National obsession, yes.
National obsession, okay, because, the joke is it's the national sport as well. Yes, Singaporeans love their food. And what is this thing that Singaporeans have that every time they go for a meal, they'll click a photograph of the food they're about to consume? This is before the Instagram days as well, I've been told. So they always like to click a photo of the food that they're going to consume. So what's that about?
Part of it is social media. So you can't completely divorce this from social media sharing, right? Part of it is that. Part of it, I think, is Singapore is really fascinating because in a lot of families, for instance, both husband and wife go out to work or have jobs, right? Even if they work from home. But at the same time, a lot of Singaporeans love to dabble in the kitchen and try cooking stuff. I guess if you love consuming something, you tend to like to experiment with making it as well, right? Sometimes you try to reverse engineer something you have had in a restaurant or in a food center. Right now, during the pandemic, because we've had different phases where going out to restaurants and cafes and food courts and sitting down to consume your meal was not allowed because of safe distancing, right? You could only take away or order deliveries. So now that people can sit down and eat in restaurants and all that again, it's such an immense relief. They tend to take pictures of the food and take it at such an angle. Not at the dining table at home, but they're seated in a restaurant or a cafe. But I think it's just about, if something is your national sport, doesn't it pervade everything? If you go to countries, for example, where any particular type of sport, be it soccer, be it cricket, be it anything, is so nationally popular, don't you see representation of that every single place, right? It permeates the consciousness. So I think that's why. And also, if you think about it, food is a very communal thing in most parts of the world.
Yeah.
And food is also, especially in Singapore, it's very colorful. So I know we normally say living things are photogenic, but food is photogenic. You take pictures of food, it's visually interesting. Now, I know some people, I have two friends who are avid collectors of pens. One of those two collects fountain pens. Now, for the average person, if you take hundreds of pictures of pens, that might be of interest to fellow collectors, but I suspect that the people outside that feel of interest won't really, look again. But if it's food, it's kind of universal. If you take pictures of food, people will look. And people from far-flung parts of the globe will say, oh, what's that, I never seen a dish like that before. Can you tell me about it? And it doesn't even have to be on social media. It could just be a texting, instant messaging thing. Say, hi, I cooked this, and wow, what's that? I've never seen anything like that. You instantly have a catalyst for conversation. I think that's why.
And I've noticed that in all the coffee shops or the hawker centers here, the variety of food, that the cuisine that's covered is amazing. You can go in there and you can get Malay food, and you can get, what they call it, Muslim food, or you can get chili crab. So Singapore's national dish, is it chicken rice or is it chili crab? Or is it something else?
I don't think it's really possible objectively to name one Singaporean national dish. I will say, though, to expand on what you just said about so many types of food. Tagore, there are many parts of the world where you can get wonderful food, right? And I would say there are also many parts of the world in which you can get many different types of food in that one country or in that one city. But Singapore is special because it's not just a wide variety of types of cuisine, it's also a very wide range of prices on the continuum. So you can have a meal for $2 per person or $2,000 per person. Never mind the currency. Whether it's US dollars, Singapore dollars, just keep the currency the same for the two ends. $2, $2,000. What will vary may be the type of food and the surroundings and the ambience. What will not be different is the quality of the food.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know of any other part of the world where that is possible. If you have a meal somewhere else for $2, if you can even get a meal for $2, it is not going to be of the same quality as the $200 or $2,000 meal. But in Singapore, the quality will be high. So that's one other unique thing about Singapore in relation to food.
What's with, and this is the only country in the world where I've seen it, what's with the tea in a bag and a straw? How did that come along?
Simply a practical way of bringing your drink to go with you. It is, I know this really fascinates a lot of people. And it's done nowadays, it's done more for hot drinks. When I was growing up, it was done equally for cold drinks as well. So, if you bought, a soda, and in those days when I was a kid, the sodas came in glass bottles.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not so practical to carry those things along. They could break, etc. Right? So if you bought a soda to go to drink with you rather than to bring home to put in the fridge, it would be poured into one of those bags with usually red nylon string on the side, and you hold it and you stick a straw inside, and then off you go on your merry way. I don't know how it started. I just know that it's very common here, and to this day, some of the more, in the newer shopping malls and such at the food courts, they will give you disposable cups, or they will usually give you a discount if you bring your own cup, your own mug. But
no fun. No fun. No fun. No. So,
less fun.
Yeah, less fun. Okay. So another thing that I really warms my heart about this place is that everybody elder to you is an uncle or an auntie. The taxi driver is always an uncle, and the lady in the shop is always an auntie. That's given. Whether you know them or you don't, it's uncle and auntie. Is that the Chinese influence, you think, or is that something that's very unique to just to this country?
It certainly is partly the Chinese influence, but I think it's, frankly, as far as I know, the emphasis, the importance placed on family and respect for elders cuts across all of the cultures that live here.
Correct.
Not just certainly the Chinese, but not just the Chinese, and consequently, think of it in the Western world, where you address people as sir, right, or madam. Frontline people in service industries, for example, or retail, that's the standard thing, isn't it? Good morning, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Here's your change, sir, or ma'am. So it's an extension of that, but it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit more. Yeah. It's less distant. I think it's simply a flow over from the reverence for family, the respect for. It doesn't necessarily suggest a difference in age, because it is very possible in a nuclear family or an extended family to have, for instance, nephew and uncle, or nephew and aunt, or niece and uncle, or whatever, where the nephew and the uncle might be almost the same age. It's possible, or even I think it's even at a stretch possible for the nephew to be older than the uncle. But the term of address is not about you are my elder in chronological age. You are my elder by virtue of the fact that your father or mother is a sibling of my parent. So I think that's what it is. And generally, I would say that diplomacy, respectfulness, tend to be very much part of the cultures here as well. So it kind of flows through, right? Yeah. If you call someone uncle or auntie, they might take offense because they might think I'm not that old. But for the most part, especially if you use an appropriate tone of voice, I mean, people are, it's respectful, right? Yeah. It's respectful. It's almost reverent.
So when I first came here, the moustache was all black, and about 2 years into being here, it started graying. And the moment it started graying, I got called uncle. So that took a little bit of a time to get used to being called uncle, but now I love it. I absolutely love it. It just warms my heart up. So another thing, let's go. Singaporeans and their infatuation to form a queue wherever they go. So I was told Singaporeans will see a queue and then they'll go and join the queue and then find out what the queue is for. Is that true?
Sometimes I know of people who do that. I think it's probably related to the fact that, in marketing, consumer redemptions, promotional giveaways, they are frighteningly effective in Singapore. If you want to boost sales of something, or the sign-up rate or registration rate for something, say you're a bank, you launch a new credit card or a new account type, give something away. something of relatively modest monetary value, but which people cannot otherwise get, or which they can only get for a very limited time. And people will want that. And I think the queuing is really about scarcity, right? Because it's only for the first 100 people, or first 500 people, or as the case may be, or while stocks last, right? Until stocks run out. I remember when I worked at MediaCorp, our national broadcaster. One day I got back from an outside appointment. Was maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and at the main reception, I saw a very, very long line of people. And you would sometimes have business visitors, they are there, to get a visitor's pass, but not that many, not 50, 60. That's not possible. And I knew generally that we had these giveaways for some of the game shows, especially. You get a pair of tickets to go and watch the recording of, for example, the Singapore edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, things like that. But I just talked to one of the ladies in the queue, and she was, I actually addressed her as auntie, because she was clearly at least 20 years my senior. And so I said to her and I guessed that she would probably be most comfortable speaking Mandarin. So I addressed her in Mandarin, and I said, "Hi, auntie. I work here. Just interested. What are you queuing for?" And she said, "Oh, I'm queuing for the Channel 8 umbrella. Channel 8, for our podcast audience who don't live here, is Singapore's most popular Chinese language free-to-air TV channel." And so she said, "I'm queuing up for the umbrella." The channel was giving away that day, I think, umbrellas with the channel logo on it. And so I chatted with her a bit. She said she had taken a taxi from Bedok, which is up in the east near the airport, to the broadcast center. That would have taken at least half an hour, 40 minutes, and would have cost her 20 Singapore dollars each way, easily. I didn't ask her that. I just know that from my own local knowledge of the roads. And the umbrella is a nice umbrella, but it's not an expensive umbrella. It's just a very modest thing. But it's just this satisfaction, this fulfillment. It's like, I relate to it because as a child, I developed my lifelong addiction to breakfast cereals because I wanted the toy inside the cereal box.
Of course. And
it's the same thing, right? It's the same behavioral and psychological phenomenon at work. We want that prize. We want that toy, that premium, that gift. And you need to do a little bit of work for it. So today on eBay or Carousel or whatever, you can buy some of those cereal toys from my childhood. It's not the same. It's not the same as buying the box of cereal, not knowing which one of 16 you'd be getting inside in the set, and then opening the cereal and then digging to the bottom to find the toy, and then finding it's a duplicate of what you have, and you can't wait to finish the cereal to get the next one. Same syndrome. I think that's why people here like to queue. And also, it's just a sense of herd curiosity, the herd mentality. What's this? I mean, what are they all? Must be something, good, and I better not lose out. Let me queue first. If I subsequently find out it's something I don't want, I'll just leave. But let me queue first while I am finding out more about what this is.
So, coming towards the end of our chat, but just 2 or 3 things you would say to our non-Singaporean listeners who come to Singapore or meet a Singaporean abroad. What would be 2 or 3 things that they could say or do to a Singaporean that would melt Singaporeans' heart, bring a smile to their face, win them over?
Spoken by non-Singaporeans. To Singaporeans? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So, so what would you say to non-Singaporeans who either come here or who get a chance to interact with the Singaporeans somewhere else in the world? What is one of the 2 things that they can do to win over the Singaporean friend of theirs?
Ah, okay. Um, well,
I think
something
I think
like
one would be food.
yes. I was thinking along that dimension. Um, well, it could be something like this. Say, I'm the newbie. I'm speaking to you, right, the Singaporean. Tagore, my friend. I'm gonna be in Singapore for 3 days. I want to try all the types of food available in Singapore. Will you help me?
Of course, can.
And okay, that's
Can.
one thing.
Yeah.
Yes. I give you another example. Tagore, I'm new here. I've never been here before. Oh, I'm coming for the first time next week, right? First time in Singapore. Can you prepare for me, please? So that the moment I come out of the terminal, you hand it to me. I want one of those packets of tissue paper so that I can use it to choke my seat, to reserve my place in a public area so that no one else comes and takes the table before I do while I'm getting my food or drink.
That's another thing about Singapore, right? You go to a crowded hawker center, and in other parts of the world, if you leave your bag or you use something, there's a good chance that it's not going to be there or someone's going to take your seat, right? But in Singapore, you can leave a small packet of tissues onto a table and nobody's going to go and sit there because they're just going to respect the fact that someone's reserved that table for themselves.
Yes.
That's bizarre. It's amazing. Yeah.
It also works on a remarkable honor system because people who do that, as in the one making the reservation, they do go back and use the table.
Yeah.
You know, you don't. I don't think anyone goes around with 10 packets of tissue just to put them on table and then disappear. No one does that. People put it there. It's when they genuinely need to sit down. They go and buy their food and beverage. They come back. They finish. They leave and they take the tissue with them. So yes, this is another quirk. What else? Well, to warm a Singaporean's heart in another way, to actually make them chuckle, I might, as a first-timer, say, Tagore, my friend, I'm looking forward to my first visit to Singapore next week. How many winter jackets should I bring?
Yeah, of course. And I remember a few months ago where I think the temperature here dropped to, I think, about 23 or 22. And everybody called it winter.
Yes, it was. Yeah. I think it was not front page news, it was on page 2 that the temperature had dropped that low. And that was probably at about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Possibly.
After a whole day of rain. Singapore is so organized. Here's the joke. Singapore is so organized, you know, the process, the government, everything. Even the rain is organized. It rains at the same time every afternoon, you know, just before Chinese New Year. If it rains at 2 o'clock, it'll rain every day at 2 o'clock until Chinese New Year for be it 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's how organized even the rain is here. You know, now that you mention it, and we've just had Singapore's 56th National Day, Independence Day celebration.
Yeah.
More low-key because of the pandemic, obviously, for safety as well as just propriety. Yeah? But as far as I can remember, with one exception, it has never rained during the National Day parade. And well, that's wonderful because it would be very difficult, right, to do a parade celebration outdoors in the rain. But the other thing, talking about rain, is even though Singapore is so small, I guess it's to do with where we are, so near the tropics. It can be pouring with rain when you set out from point A and you go on a 20-minute drive, and along the way to your destination, you might pass through another area with bright sunshine and no rain, and then at your destination, it will be no sunshine and no rain. Very possible.
Yeah.
Or point A, blazing hot sunshine, point B, thunderstorm, point C, mild sunshine.
Yeah.
Happens quite a lot.
So, Kenneth, coming back now to what we both got connected with initially, cinema. So now you run the Singapore Film Society. You are responsible for taking cinema from Singapore to the world and bringing cinema from the world to Singapore. And I know I think last year sometime you were doing a film from the Middle East festival, and I remember you telling me that when we met for a meal. So tell us a little bit about the film culture here in Singapore. I mean, some of the prominent filmmakers, what are the genres that, appeal to the people here, the type of films that are made here, for example?
I would say there are a number of genres that are very popular. One, which I think is the case everywhere in the world where movies are made, it will be what I call the local slice of life, man in the street comedies. And we have a Singaporean filmmaker called Jack Neo, who really has his finger on the pulse of the common man. During the 1997 financial crisis, he made a film, even the title is in Singlish, called Money No Enough. And it's about three adults, three guys, three blokes, who are facing different kinds of hardship as a result of one getting retrenched from his job and things like that. And we also have quite a number of young, as in, they are below 30 or below 35 years of age filmmakers who do a lot of stories about, Singapore and the challenges and aspirations of young people growing up in a very urbanized, quite a competitive environment, competitive education system, competitive workforce. And two other genres that are very popular in Singapore, horror and suspense. And I think that's simply because so many of the so many types of cultural heritage of Asian cultures have deep roots in folklore and mythology. And so that's very fertile ground for storytelling. Cinema is a visual medium, and horror is something, the most effective horror films in my view are those where not a single drop of blood is spilled, but it all plays on the mind, right?
Right.
And another genre that's extremely popular would be sort of action films. I think this is also quite universal, but given where Singapore is and what Singapore is, action films where Singapore is part of something happening in many countries. Somebody comes here, there's an international chase, a pursuit, and then there's a huge conspiracy to dominate the world. It was hatched in Singapore, it was foiled in Singapore, or it was foiled by someone from Singapore somewhere else. So these things, I think they appeal to the vicarious hero or would-be hero or heroine in all of us. But at the end of the day, I think people just love watching movies overall. Hollywood movies are very, very popular in Singapore. We get a lot of Asian movies as well, Chinese language, Korean, Japanese, Malay films, Indian films, and so on. So here's another bit of trivia. In Singapore cinemas, on average, 11 new movies open every week.
No
That's
way.
a lot of movies. On average. Some weeks is more, some weeks is fewer. 11 on average. On average. So you're looking at more than 500 movies. I'm not talking about specialized film festivals. I'm talking about mainstream commercial theatrical release. More than 500 movies in a year in Singapore get released. And so it's a melting pot of movies as well, not just our locally made ones. So those are it's a flavor of some of the genres and types of filmmakers working here. Singapore makes, in terms of homegrown films from Singapore, about 6 or 7 or 8, sometimes 10 films a year. So that's the output. We want very much as a country to do more. There are many stories to be told here or from here.
Yeah. And you're also responsible for bringing world cinema into Singapore.
Yeah.
What is a typical Singaporean's appetite for watching films that are, not traditionally available to them in the cinemas, but are accessible to them via film festival, that like the ones that you run?
Voracious, in one word. Huge appetite. I'll give an example. We run an annual European film festival. This year we had 23 films from 23 countries in Europe, one film per country. We screen each film once, so that's 23 screenings. 23 screenings, 23 films, spread over a little over 2 weeks, two and a half weeks. Everything was sold out before the first weekend. Everything. It's just that hunger for films. Admittedly, a film festival is more festive than a normal screening. So people do pay attention. They know that it's happening from this period to this period. They have to see it. But I mean, in general, the interest is huge. There are many reasons for this. One is what we talked about earlier, international trade, openness to international culture. But it's also because we have many polytechnics and universities in Singapore, and almost all of them have film and media related courses. Some offer specialized diplomas and degrees in film and media. So when you have a lot of students studying this at the tertiary level, it's only natural that that will also fuel their appetite to watch a wider range of films, like reading widely to improve your vocabulary. Yeah? Plus, the other thing that would be perhaps of interest to our podcast audience, it's relatively affordable to go to the cinema in Singapore relative to other things. Symphony orchestra concert ticket, or a ticket to a play, or a musical theatre performance might cost you 3 figures per head in Singapore dollars, but a movie ticket on a weekday will cost you $9.50. So it's relatively affordable, especially for young people, young dating, courting couples, and young groups of youngsters, students, millennials. It's a relatively affordable outing, or relatively affordable pastime. And so I think all of these factors combine to make the appetite for cinema ferocious, absolutely huge.
Wow. So, Kenneth, just my final question, I'm going to come back to you first thing now. What are you working on? What are you looking forward to?
Myself. I have just completed, I submitted my manuscript for a book chapter. I've been asked, along with several other people who worked at the former location of our national broadcaster, which is called Caldecott Broadcast Centre. MediaCorp has moved. But those of us who worked there were asked to write a chapter each on our memories of working there. So I've just completed that chapter. The book will be published will be out at the end of October. On the work front, I have 2 film festivals coming up, Italian in September and Japanese in October. So these are in collaboration with, respectively, the Italian Embassy in Singapore and the Japanese Embassy in Singapore. Looking forward very much to those. And I think also just thankful every day for many blessings, being all right, being able to do meaningful, enjoyable things despite the challenges of the pandemic around us. Being careful about just remaining healthy, remaining fit, remaining upbeat, but really enjoying. I think one of the words, these buzzwords these days, is people have always talked about adaptability and adapting, but I think now the buzzword is to pivot. You have to pivot. You have to be able to change, and it's difficult to plan things long range because of all the uncertainty out there in the macro landscape. But sometimes when that's the case, I think it makes us all even more appreciative of the things that we have, and I'm very thankful. I'm a person who likes to be with people. Not being able to spend a lot of time with people face to face was a difficult adjustment for me. But it has also helped me to just embrace tools, virtual meetings, tools like the one we are using now for the podcast. And in a lot of ways, I think, just again on the film organization front, being able to get filmmakers from around the world to interact real time with our audiences. This technology didn't exist just because the pandemic came about, but I think the pandemic made everyone embrace this way of communicating. And as a result, I think it has really just geometrically expanded the range of people, practitioners from around the world with whom our audiences have been able to interact. We had a young Sundance discovery, Carlo Mirabello Davis. He's a young filmmaker from New York. His first film, Swallow, got a prize in Sundance. We screened it, and then the Q&A was done online. 104 Singaporeans took part in the Q&A. He was bowled over. We did it at 8:30 p.m. Singapore time, 8:30 a.m. his time in New York City. He said, I can't believe 104 people from halfway across the world, A, watch my film, B, want to question me for more than an hour about my work. This is amazing. And truth be told, if we had done that in the traditional way, by flying him here and having him meet the audience in a cinema, I don't know that we would have necessarily gotten 104 people in the hall. We might have, but I rather think that in a way we even got more people because we were doing it this way. And he took the questions from the comfort of his home. It was lovely. So this is what's happening. It's what I'm looking forward to, looking ahead to, and of course, my friend, to spending more time rubbing minds and rubbing shoulders with you very soon.
Can at our only restaurant that both of us, Kenneth, thank you so much for talking to me. And
thank you.
Talking to you is always it's something that it's very close to my heart. Whether we do a podcast or we're sitting in a restaurant or you come over, it's amazing always talking to you. But talking to you about Singapore especially has been great fun. I'm glad we had an opportunity to celebrate this great country. Thank you for being on my podcast, and I can't wait to see you in person very soon. While you eat your noodles, I have my fried rice, and we sit at that same table and we talk forever.
Thank you, my friend. The pleasure and honor are all mine. Thank you so much.